Thank you, and welcome to our freewheeling fireside chat on the topic of blue funds. Our model blue fund and our model blue funder for the evening will be Mr. Will Scott. We'll use the private retrieval blue fund as our example, and then now's the time for me to introduce our one slide, I guess.
Does everyone know what a blue fund?
Okay.
Does everyone know the terminology blue fund? Okay, cool. So the idea with blue funds and the team of Network Goods, which is sort of all of us, more or less, plus or minus. Will is a friend or a fan of the Network Goods team. But we look at regenerative public goods, and we're specifically interested in blue funds. So the term within blue funds is sort of an initiative by the network funding team, Network Goods team at Protocol Labs to decentralize our funding efforts by propagating infrastructure that would be financial, legal, operational, administrative to essentially enable teams to launch their own public goods investment vehicles or support things like novel tooling. So we're kind of trying to create a Y Combinator, essentially, model, but doing that for public goods. So really optimizing the supply chain. I slept 20 minutes. Optimizing sort of the pipeline of operational infrastructure, legal support to really accelerate projects and ideas into the ecosystem. So for someone like myself who's worked a lot in open source hardware and open source software, one of the bottlenecks has always been administrative tasks, payment time, speed, implementation, documentation, all these sort of things. So that's something that we really try to support with our Blue Funds effort.
Excellent. Yeah. So for this particular initiative, we used a research initiative as our foray into the Blue Funds model, and so it's essentially we tried to spin up research initiatives as a service. Encourage researchers and engineers from our network and from the broader community to come to us with their ideas, maybe to bring a research artifact or two. And for our team, in this case my team in network research and our sibling team, research acceleration and network funding, to turn that into a full-fledged research initiative, research funding opportunity. That means taking the artifact, composing that into some sort of an appropriate open problem or request for proposals, disseminating that request for proposals. Yes, okay, this is our one slide, so enjoy. Helping to build an advisory committee to perform the evaluation function. So there's, of course, several layers of evaluation. The evaluation of the proposal to create a blue fund itself, sort of the meta-evaluation. Then the evaluation of proposals that takes place as applicants who wish to participate in the program submit the applications as they would for other types of research programs, whether it's a grant program, a bounty program, a prize program. Building all those structures, creating a repeatable playbook for implementing this again over time. And as Addie said, building a pipeline that we can hook up essentially to different sources of funding, break down, recompose as needed, a flexible framework to support many different types of efforts. And of course, not just research efforts. It just happens that this first one was a really excellent research opportunity. And I guess I'd like to turn it over to Will to describe exactly what the problem was, what your interest was, what caused you to come to us.
Yeah, and I guess for me, the description of the specific problem that we're using for this first Blue Fund, I think also is useful in helping to make this a little bit more concrete and help motivate what this looks like and what we're thinking about. And so, as is on the slide, the Blue Fund that I'm involved with is on private retrieval, and so the specific problem that we looked at and thought was a good fit is we were looking at IPFS and Filecoin and Web3 in general, all of the work that my team, which is very much a product team in PL, is involved in. And we realized that there's a need for better privacy stories and better privacy technologies for us to use in building that. And some of that, there's tools, and you could do contracts, you could do specific grants, you could try and figure out how to use them. But there was a gap where when we look at how would I, if I was today, going to add privacy into some of these, I'd be looking at the current generation of mixnets, and I'd really be trading off latency and making a worse product in doing that. But at the same time, coming from an academic background, I know there's a lot of other mechanisms that are out there that researchers are working on, but none of them have gotten over this gap. There's a lot of things where there's papers on them, and there's maybe small prototypes, but there's no demonstration of them at scale. And it's a area where the academic ideas that are coming are, they're keep being new ones, and they're keep being new interesting things that people are thinking about. And so the thought was, it would be really valuable to us, and it would be this general good very broadly, to support that privacy research such that when we revisit this problem from a product perspective in 3 or 5 years, we've got more options. And so what does that mean? We think there's a gap between how academia is currently funding this space of privacy tech, which is primarily focused on getting into some top conferences. There's some government funding. But there's not so much about, can you take your prototype and get it up to the first 10,000 or first 100,000 users? So small prototype funds to nonprofits. And more specifically, how do you think about privacy beyond just low latency web, which is really where it is as the flashy demo, which has a whole set of problems that we don't actually have. And so if you can do privacy for messaging or for content address data, which is very applicable to us, but has different different characteristics and gives you more options, there's a bunch of opportunities for being able to come up with interesting papers. And so the thought was this Blue Fund structure gives us a way to come back to this problem in a few years and have a much better outlook on what we'll be able to integrate into IPFS and Filecoin.
Excellent. That's actually, you've really captured what this slide is meant to represent, the idea that the Blue Fund is meant to help transit projects from science, from more the pure research blue area to the green production deployment, productionization area through this chasm where there are limited funding sources available. There are limited structures for supporting projects in ways beyond funding, actually. And maybe, Addie, if you want to talk a little bit about the types of structures that you see potentially being useful in the future that we can deploy using the Blue Fund's rubric.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we recently launched the IPFS fund, so that's really kind of identifying and accelerating projects within IPFS. But for me specifically, I mean, Will is a great example. Tooling is an issue. Things like solving for latency is, I think, a really common issue within security implementations. And so there's really specific things that I'm interested in, but at a larger kind of ecosystem level, I think we're looking at scientifically based implementations as well as non-scientifically based implementations. So we're trying to kind of reach across from what I would consider a lot of what PL has done in the past, which is traditionally fund just research initiatives, but go outside of academia and really look at funding and researching and supporting things that can actually be applied in real world, in the field, in regime states, and kind of places that there's applications outside of just the university. And so that's something that I really hope to kind of accelerate in the next year, as well as things like FVM or libp2p. I mean, we have so many great projects and so many great ideas, and it's really about sort of, to some extent, like Juan was saying, looking at and kind of recognizing what are these really specific things that we can recognize that are holes or gaps or bottlenecks, and how can we support those so that they then release a whole nother kind of microcosm or macrocosm of events and projects and possibilities.
Awesome, a really exciting future. And one thing I want to hang on, one thing you just said, I'm taking over the moderator role, it's because I'm in the middle, I can't help it. Sorry. You mentioned supporting projects that are outside of research, outside of academia. And I think what's really cool about Will's Blue Fund is that it has a research component, but it also has a really important prototyping implementation component. Would you mind speaking to that for a second?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I think this came from a couple things. And one was just when we were thinking, what are sort of the canonical ideas of work that we think would be good to support with this, which was, I think, one of the useful exercises is what is an example of something that you would think this fund should support. Mm-hmm. And when I was thinking about that, it really was a mix of both. Well, if a research group comes up with a great idea and there's a new paper that's exciting and brings a new technique that turns out to be applicable, that would be a great thing that we should definitely be supporting. But we also need this transition to practice. And there's a big gap where there's a set of nonprofits that aren't applying for grants in the same way, or that are really sort of at low levels where funding can make a huge difference, and where there is a much more of that gap. And it seemed like a larger impact even in potentially allowing some of those entities where there's a lot of practitioners who have a lot of direct knowledge to be able to prototype and then build technology artifacts rather than papers in advancing that. So I think we said we were allocating roughly half and half where we're going to try and be funding roughly half towards academic-ish, where the outcome that gets proposed is things like papers or measurement evaluations, and roughly half where the outcome that's being proposed is towards software artifacts. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think you just mentioned independently two words that are very important to us, impact and evaluation. Mm-hmm. And I want to put them together and make them kiss and ask you about how you plan to evaluate these projects as they come in your role as the DRI, as the Blue Funder, the leader of this Blue Fund, and the types of support that you've assembled to help you pick which projects we want to fund and how to determine what a successful outcome means.
And we're going through the whole story of this Blue Fund again in microcosm, right? Because so my role here, in some sense, was initially making that pitch that I just gave to all of you 5 minutes ago of why this is an important problem, where us funding this as a general commons where we don't necessarily get a direct grant back is still a good thing for us. And so then the work was, okay, what is the structure? And I got very lucky in that a lot of the structure just sort of happened and I didn't have to do anything. And so my main role was assembling an advisory committee, so reaching out to a set of people I thought would be really good to evaluate inbound proposals. I'm really happy with the advisory committee we have for this. We've got a set of external researchers. Philip Winter is at Brave Research, was previously doing a bunch of measurements academically around Tor and privacy tech. We've got Katharina, who's at a university in the Netherlands, who's also been doing a bunch of research on measurement. And then we've got Rosario and Henry. So we've got a mix from industry, from academia, from research, who really span this and who are all experts in the area and can review these proposals and comment on them. That structure also got set up as a very lightweight ask on these external advisory board body. And that means that this whole process ends up being, I think, hopefully, faster and lower effort than a traditional funding structure, where both it's able to be reused and then the work that we're asking for, the specific practitioners in this problem, can really be tightly focused, where we're not having to think about finding the time to have the PC in person where we spend the day doing like conference review or stack ranking or something, but rather can have a pretty lightweight commenting on rolling applications and then getting to a decision quickly as they come through.
Awesome.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of what you anticipate in terms of the roadmap and what you're looking for in terms of things that you might potentially fund?
Sure. We opened a little over a month ago with the initial call for paper and sent out a set of emails, or a call for proposals, and sent out a sort of a first round of communication. We've gotten in initial proposals that are under evaluation with our advisory committee now. We're doing that first pass through, ironing out everything, making sure that we're happy with the questions that we're asking and so forth, and are sort of on the way towards the first round of funding. I think the thought is that I did targeted outreach to, with that first sort of, it now exists, here's the website, here's how you apply, to a set of candidate projects that I thought would be well-suited, such that we can then have the first round who are getting funding as here's the example of the things we want to fund. Because that gives subsequent rounds of applicants a much clearer view of what is the focus here. Because you can say, well, here's past things that we think were really cool. But when they see that you've actually funded a set of things, that's a really clear signal of like what is the focus of this fund. So that's sort of the thought, is there's sort of a trial run both to understand how much time we're actually taking through all of this as we get started, but then also that helps focus and make it a clearer vision.
Fantastic. And I guess maybe I don't know how much time we have.
Maybe we're being
signaled off.
Yeah.
And so I think that's excellent. That's all the time we have today to talk about Blue Funds. But if you have any questions, if you'd like to meet us in the breaks or chat with us afterward, please tag us. We'd love to chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will.
Thank you.